Gonna skip a lot of useless details. Basically, I played a paladin that was not falling for the tricks of this evil god that the rest of the party was fawning over. Evil god shows up while we're in my paladin's hometown and says if the party wants more power, they have to kill everyone in the village. The moment that pissed me off was when we cleared bandits out of the mayor's house and we found a secret room he used to kill people in. I was cool with smoking just the mayor, but my party tries to tell me in character and out of character that the murder room justified the slaughter of the whole town. I was straight up forced off of a character that I liked. He wasn't a Boy Scout by any means, but he wasn't going to Anakin his own town for the sake of the party. I would have loved to go into an evil campaign, but being surprised with one sucked so hard. I've been out of that game for months. New adventuring party. Slaughter of the innocent en masse requirement for joining. Well, they could put that in session 0, I guess. I've been holding on to this for a while, but I really just need to get off my chest. Recently, I had one of the worst D&D campaigns I have ever seen. So bad, I just up and left in the middle of my second session. It's got all the classics, a toxic group, a rude and lazy DM, and a plain lack of organization all coming together to make an experience that might have otherwise been tolerable, downright unbearable. I was temporarily off work due to the 2020 shutdowns, and I was looking for something to kill some time. I went on Roll20 and found a group for Rime of the Frost Maiden right when the module came out. They'd recently lost a member for some reason and were looking to find a player as they were a few levels in. Excited to dive into something new, I put in an application. To my excitement, the DM messages me right away and asks me to cook up a character with a backstory with plenty of hooks. My character was a human nobleman packed to the blade warlock, the ambitious youngest son of a wealthy noble family. He was constantly looked down on by his stronger, older brothers. Knowing he'd never surpass their skills as a warrior on his own, he starts turning to mystical sources looking for an edge. He ended up falling in with an elite dueling club with religious undertones, promising him untold power if he would declare himself to their inner mysteries. Young and foolish, he got in deeper and deeper with the cult until he needed to be coerced into pledging his soul to their god. Surprise, it turned out that they worshipped a devil looking to corrupt members of the nobility into the service of the Nine Hells. Luckily for him, he's smart enough to get an escape clause written into the contract. If he would pull off a service for the devil, he'd be freed from his obligation to it. The devil, having no intention of letting him go and wanting to make an example of him to the other souls he'd conned, tasked him with retrieving a long-lost artifact located somewhere in Icewind Dale. Despite it being an obvious suicide mission, my warlock set himself to the task and traveled north. Not the most original backstory, but I figured it had enough plot hooks to make it juicy. The favor from my patron could easily be tied into whatever dungeons were in the Dale, and there was potential for enemies in the form of other cultists looking to get out of the deal, or bounty hunters sent by my family to take me home, or stuff like that. Lots of fun stuff that could be brought into a sandbox-style campaign. He seemed sold on the idea and agreed I'd be arriving in Icewind Dale on a ship and waiting for word from my patron for the next steps in repaying my debt. The town would be the next stop the party would be visiting on their journey, so I'd be able to bump into them and get started. I showed up for the first session, eager to see how my character's story gets weaved into the narrative. It's too bad that absolutely none of my work ended up being used. First session starts. 2 things happen right off the bat that set me on edge. I find out the party's de facto leader is a DMPC who just so happens to have the DM's name and be his avatar image. This is the sort of thing most stories in this subreddit are made out of, but the game literally just started and I had nothing better to do, so I told myself I was being judgmental and decided to give him a chance. I've seen DMPCs done well before. Since the story is here, you can tell this was not a well-done DMPC, but we'll get to that. Second thing that sets me on edge, everyone in the group is a furry. Now, I have absolutely nothing against any group of people, but the culture of the group had me put off almost immediately. As I describe my character walking into the inn, one of the other players immediately interrupts me. Why is he human? I'm sorry, what? Why is he human? This is D&D, dude. You can be literally anything you want, and the best you could do is just be a human? I'm meeting the group for the first time, and the first thing they're doing is insulting me for my character choice. I bite my tongue and explain that my character is a nobleman from a human city in the Forgotten Realms. Me making an anthro dog man would make no sense for the backstory. Anyway, I'm branded the token human of the group, already feeling more than a bit like an outsider and the butt of the joke. I go ahead and make my character introduction, offering any services as an extra blade during the Yeti hunt. I'm told I can't come with them yet? Wait, why? For my verbal description of them, the group decides that the clothes I've described don't sound warm enough for Icewind Dale. The DMPC agrees, and since he's the group leader, that's that. Apparently, my nobleman was too stupid and poor to have packed proper clothes for the Arctic before taking a several-week-long trip to the Arctic. Okay, how much money for proper clothes? Let's just trade up and then we can go. Oh, no. The whole party wants to come and get their own things, so the DM RPs the store owner with an obnoxiously long amount of time. So we end up going to the shop, and I'm made to use all of my starting cash and agree to do unspecified future favors for this shopkeeper before he finally sells me the set I need. A set of leather armor identical in function to what I'm already wearing, but made of thicker leathers. And this is after all the haggling. Nearly an hour into the session, all I've managed to do is not just go broke, but go into debt with yet another shady guy. Absolutely riveting. It's no wonder they lost their last player, who they ridiculed multiple times for having raised these complaints and then daring to quit on them. The quest itself is pretty straightforward once we get to it. Go out and kill a Yeti hiding in a cave at the top of the mountain, except there is one thing. The DM claims the book says we're supposed to be joined by a party of NPCs looking to kill the monster too. The DM, who has a very tired and droning sounding voice, except when he's aggravated, sounds more and more bored as he's introducing these NPC characters. Suddenly he just goes quiet and asks us to roll a dexterity check. Okay. A massive avalanche suddenly comes out of nowhere and almost sends us flying off the mountain. I barely make my save. DMPC, of course, makes his off screen, but a good portion of the party is already wounded and back at the bottom of the mountain. We're told all the NPCs were caught in the path of the avalanche and killed. I actually get interested again at this point. Wow, was this part of the new module? These random events that could seriously wound the party? Something that showcases the cruelty and danger of the harsh wilderness? Well, no. While we were all trying to regroup, he let slip his true reasons, while in general being whiny about how the dice weren't fair to the rest of the party. He got halfway through introducing his NPCs when he decided controlling them on top of doing the upcoming counter was too complicated and boring, so it just worked better if they were all dead by this avalanche. Why didn't he just retcon the NPCs away instead of nearly killing the whole party in an avalanche? Well, he cited the same reason I had to roleplay getting scammed by a shopkeeper for nearly half an hour. He was dedicated to realism. The lazy asshole almost TPK'd us because he didn't want to have to do the extra work of controlling additional characters, and then whined about luck when he failed to consider if his asspull of a solution was something the party could survive. The actual Yeti fight was pretty straightforward. There were 5 of us, and there were 2 monsters. Apparently that's an okay number for him to be bothered with playing, other than his brave, handsome, muscle-bound, were-polar bear DMPC. We ended the session not long after that, but a few other miscellaneous events happened, particularly close to the end. He was pretty passive-aggressive with me for the entire session after the avalanche. We'd found the Yeti's cave, and the Tabaxi Ranger wanted to do some investigation to see if she could find this thing and have us sneak up on it. The DM goes quiet and then asks her to roll. She rolls high. Okay. You find something? What do I find? Traces of the Yeti? Yeah, what kind of traces? Where is it? Well, it's the kind of trace you could hear it or you could smell it. It is an utterly baffling reply, to say the least. It's clear he doesn't want to tell us where he's hidden the damn monster in the cave so it can jump us. I decide to break the awkward tension with a joke. Is the trace a fart? Everyone got a little laugh, except for our glorious anthro-polar bear DMPC leader, For the rest of the session, whenever he hears a stray noise over the mic while someone else is talking, he angrily stops everything to call me out on cutting people off, making me apologize before we can continue. Him and his buddies making fun of me for being the token human is fine, but a single joke at his expense and nuclear war has been declared. He seems to sense our displeasure with the cop-out of the Avalanche because on the way down the mountain, he lets us check where the bodies fell. Miraculously, they were fine, or at least they were alive enough to let us take them back to town with us in the back of the tabaxi's pet bison, Appa. To be fair, one of the horses in my campaign is now named Appa, so can't judge there. So by the end, it's pretty clear to me why they're having trouble keeping players. I felt a little bummed out for having wasted my time, but was also morbidly curious where we go from here. I was also curious why the other members of the party tolerated him, so I decided to come back for the next session to see what happened later when we had some of the chances to interact outside a mini dungeon crawl. Maybe because he tolerated their more unusual moments. That, coupled with his trend of being actually so lazy he doesn't even bother trying to be subtle or tell a story, both worsened heavily during the second session, and is actually why I quit the campaign, but that is for another time. For another time, you say? With the benefit of finding this story months late. The time is actually now. Without further ado, Part 2. Let me tell you what happened during my second and last session with this particular group. So I spend the rest of the following week reflecting on my experiences, and I've been a regular on the subreddit for a while. But I was truly mystified by this group, this dysfunctional managing to exist in reality. The DM is not only egotistical with his Fursona DMPC bossing everyone around, but is so lazy he can hardly be bothered to run encounters and play NPCs that aren't his own avatar. I try to rationalize it away as the typical awkwardness and slowness of the first few levels while the party is squishy and trying to get to know each other. I tell myself that next session will be better because the party will be spending it in town. That should give me a chance to roleplay my character and get to know everyone a little better. In short, that doesn't happen, and I end up getting so frustrated that I get up and leave 2 hours into the session. I'd already learned how much of a lazy, disorganized jerk our DM was, but I didn't truly understand the depths of his disinterest in running his own game. This session can be best described as a slow-moving train wreck of venom, disorganization, and boredom that ultimately became too much to bear. Funny. So let's start at the beginning of the session. So we're currently traveling back into town on the back of our Tabaxi Ranger's pet bison. DM decides it's time for a random encounter. Suddenly the ground starts rumbling beneath our feet. A massive monster comes over the horizon and stomps past our tiny group. It's the Tarrasque. Everyone freaks out for a little bit, but the DM tells us we're beneath its notice, and it passes us by. He tells us both in and out of character that he's going to lead us back to kill that thing when we're level 20. My level 3 warlock jokes that if someone told him they were going to fight something that big, he'd tell them good luck and sit in the tavern, which gets a few chuckles from the rest of the group. DM audibly scoffs and calls me a coward. Now, maybe it was him trying to be in character since his DMPC Mary Sue Ware Polar Bear is supposed to be this wise and valorous leader, but the raw contempt in his voice and what he ends up doing later makes me strongly suspect that it was him, the DM, being serious. I'm caught off guard and more than a little irritated, and consider it his strike one. We get to the next town and get stopped by the gate guards. Apparently there's a serial killer going about that's a werebear like our party lead, and they're hesitant to let him through the gates. More guards come out and surround him, and his DMPC goes into some melodramatic speech about how he will not resist these noble guards who are only doing their duty to protect their city. But please, don't arrest the rest of his beloved friends. I should point out that the DM has a very flat droning voice. When he tried to speak in his DMPC's voice, I think he was trying to sound all lofty and wise with this weird, airy lilt to his tone. All it managed to do was make him sound like he was a fat man out of breath, panting every word. Given that we weren't particularly interested in hearing this speech, the party scatters. Some of us just bolt away while one gets the genius idea in his head to somehow climb over the wall and jump down into the village using his furry powers. He fails and takes massive fall damage falling over the giant wall. DM sighs and utters a line that will be burned into my memory forever. "Well, out of character, I'll let you know." And he goes on to explain that this isn't how he wanted this encounter to go. He just wanted to add some flavor, while also totally hogging the spotlight, and hype up an encounter with this were-polar bear he plans on hitting us with later. In contrast with their suspicion of just a few seconds ago, the guards suddenly lower their spears, and I quote, straight from the man's mouth, we're just guards, dudes. If you say you won't cause trouble, it's just not our business what you're doing here." So they open the gate, and DM declares, "We all head to the tavern." No explanations, no roleplay, no player agency. The guards just let us through, and we are magically apparated into the tavern with the DMPC. How immersive. Does the guy who tried to skip the cutscene and jump the gate get his missing health back? No, of course not. He shouldn't have tried that. Moving on. So we get the bounty for killing the Yetis, and it's at this point he pulls strike 2. The Tabaxi Ranger gets her share of the reward and starts celebrating. I've mentioned the Tabaxi before because she's really the only other member of the group that stood out as memorable. We barely interacted, but she was probably the only person in the group I'd care to play with again. In contrast to the edgelords and generic other guys we were playing with, she liked to crack jokes and brightened up the mood by not really taking things seriously. What little I could glean of her backstory was that she was some sort of nomad that lived on the tundra alone, and so got really excited and cheerful when she got to interact with people. When she gets her share of the pay, she describes how her character does a little happy dance and crawls up on our werebear leader's shoulders to give him a hug. Well, out of character, I'll let you know. The DM pauses things to tell her to not try that with him again. He, the DM, works a long job before taking the time to come and DM this game, and now he's got all sorts of issues with physical contact and why it's unnecessary. Keep in mind the physical contact was in character. I've been through too much stuff to deal with stuff like that. Trying that with me in real life would result in a lot of trouble for you. The only time an edgelord sounds cringier than he already is when he's a furry and tries to growl like a bear after saying it, and only manages to sound like drunk Chewbacca choking to death. Nonetheless, the Tabaxi just apologizes and gets really quiet for the rest of the time we're here. We move on, the mood thoroughly killed. DM declares it's time for the party to handle any business we have in town. I'm surprised that the DM doesn't do downtime activities like Xanathar's explains. Rather than have us just say what we're doing and do it off screen, or roll a few dice or anything, he has everyone do effectively a one-on-one RP with him for whatever shopping trip or activity we want to do, which results in everyone else just standing around and being bored. And every time someone does something that would actually require some roleplay, he sighs and chimes in. Well, out of character, I'll let you know. Every single time. Don't get attached to this NPC. The book says I'm going to be helpful while playing him, but he's a spy for a cult. No point in asking that kid questions about the murders. The book says he doesn't know anything. That's right, the bad DM is somehow simultaneously dedicated to being as lazy as possible in his storytelling and committed to maximum realism at the same time. On the druid's turn, before they can declare what they're doing, the DM declares the druid's pocket was picked. The druid declares he's going to track down the thief. Cue 15 minutes of asking around where the thief's hideout is, going into the thief hideout, and finding 5 thieves standing around counting out the stolen coin purse. Druid loudly demands that they, give him his money back. DM starts sniggering. DM asks why the druid went to get the coin purse when it was the paladin who was pickpocketed. Everyone is confused. No, dude, that's not what you said. You clearly said it was the druid. Everyone backs the druid up on this, saying the DM must have misspoken. We tell him he can just change it so that it was a druid who was robbed, or just have the paladin be there instead. He ignores everyone and just starts laughing like he's pulled the funniest prank in the world on this druid, loudly wondering why he chose to waste his turn on a side quest that wasn't even his. The DM is the one who literally told him to do that. The DM chose not to correct him at any point while we were making this stupid RP investigation. The DM is clearly at fault for this, but it's okay because he forgives the druid for his mistake and has the thieves give the coin purse back without a fight, going to the next player's turn. Eventually, we get to my turn. If you read my previous post, I mentioned that I'm playing a warlock in Icewind Dale to do service to my patron. We're waiting for my patron to reach out to me to give instructions on what quest I'm supposed to do for him. This is the backstory the DM agreed to give me, on the understanding he'd be expected to give a hook at some point to go along with what the party is doing. Well, okay, Warlock, what do you want to do? What? What's your character's motivation? He came to Icewind Dale for something, right? There's an awkward silence. Did he seriously forget my character's backstory, or does he seriously expect me to roleplay me interacting with my own patron? I ask him what he means, and he and the other members of the party get more and more annoyed I don't embark on some massive mini side questline doing mundane chores in my room in the inn or opening my own business or something. Apparently, and I kid you not, the tabaxi took up a ton of time in the session before the one I joined, opening and operating some kind of fishery business, and is expected to check back in when we head into town to see how it's running. Look, are you going to do something or what? I finally just come up with something after a minute. I'll go to the bounty office. I figured I'd check in to see if my family had a bounty on my head due to some backstory stuff, or at least kill some minor enemy and get some money to spend since I lost all of my money in the first 15 minutes of the last session. The fighter chimes in. I'd like to go with him. Sure, might as well get this downtime session done quickly so we can actually go on some kind of adventure. Okay, fighter, your backstory secret is that a group of bandits killed your family, right? Out of character, I'll let you know. I'm probably going to have the next group of bandits we fight be those bandits, so I can just get out of the way. The fighter goes quiet. They hadn't gone into any detail at all about their character. That's right, the DM is just so lazy. He was just openly spoiling players' backstories just to get them out of the way. Anything to avoid having hard work and DMing the story, right? Something goes down at the bounty office, but I am not paying attention anymore. I'm just seething at the DM's blatant disrespect to role-playing our characters and having wasted all of our time with this game. Someone else's turn comes up and he wants to buy a particular item from a shop in town. Sure, look, I don't really understand the part in the book about this shop. Could you guys just sort this out for me? And he just starts uploading shaky phone camera shots of pages from the Icewind Dale book. At this point, I just left the Discord, deleted the invite, and a moment later, the DM blocked me. It was honestly just a complete disaster from start to end. I honestly felt like the DM wanted to God mode run Icewind Dale with his self-insert, but couldn't find someone to DM for him. So he effectively wanted us to play as NPCs for him to interact with, and occasionally psychologically torture outside of dungeons. Hey, Pachka the Werebear, if you ever read this, please get stepped on by the Tarask. The OP pretty much hit the nail right on the head with predicting the DM's motivations. I am almost 100% certain that is the reason behind this madness and explains a lot. The DM's lack of care, the DM's lack of experience. And look, there's nothing wrong with wanting to become a DM and being a new DM. I do believe that this guy is a new DM based on just the story and how the game was run, but the motivation behind this guy DMing, it's just not there. He clearly just wants to play as this DMPC and have some kind of power fantasy, which is not a way to run a game. You have to remember that you're running for a group. You're all telling the story together, DM included, and you need to prioritize the players and their choices. Obviously, you're important too. As the DM, you should have fun, and if you're not having fun, you should talk to your party about that. But remember that there are more players than there are DMs. They need to have fun. Their choices should drive the story. That's the whole point of playing D&D. This DM has completely forgotten that. Going outside the game, the OP was immediately put off from the group by jokes they made early on in the campaign during the first part of the story. And I understand that those jokes are fun in your friend group. Me and my friends make token white guy, token straight jokes, whatever, all the time in our group of friends. we don't make those jokes to just random people who are coming to hang out with us. If we meet a new guy for the first time, our first instinct is not to viciously rib them. It's just not good courtesy. I feel like that should be common knowledge, but I see it more and more. The guy's not being too sensitive. It's just that he's not used to the brand of humor that this group is accustomed to, and that is completely normal. Ease up when a new guy joins your D&D group. The worst thing you can do is make them feel like an outsider. Be accepting of new people. Otherwise, they're not going to stick around for long. If you guys enjoyed this episode of RPG Horror Stories and want to let me know, then please do hit the like button. If you want to see more of my content, then please do subscribe to Crispy's Tavern. And finally, if you want to leave your own stories or thoughts, go down to the comments down below. If you can't think of a comment, leave the comment Tarask to let me know you made it to the end of the video. In essence, like, comment, subscribe. I will see you all next time. Farewell.